Why, hello, and I apologize for being late today. The good thing about, or bad thing about running a creative practice is sometimes you get in the flow. And that is exactly what I did. As you can see, well, maybe you can see the paint on my hands. Got in the flow and forgot to set my alarm on my phone to tell me that it was, I usually give myself a 10-minute warning before these so I can go on over and get myself ready. And I had no such thing today. So, not good. And that is why I am a bit late. I'm going to get you set over here and let's talk a little bit. The good news is that today, I kind of wanted to have myself set up at the big table, but this is all right. And I definitely hadn't wanted to really have a script to speak from. A couple of these I actually kind of scripted out what I wanted to say, and I don't know. They don't feel as much like me. So I very much, oh, except we do have dogs also. Usually I get rid of them. Um, I also wanted to have this very much as just kind of a extemporaneous conversation versus something where, hey, I am particularly scripted. Just because I thought that I think those tend to go a little bit better and be more my voice. So, what I really want to talk to you about isn't it's not really about productivity, it's about relationships building. And that's the relationship, not just of, hey, ladybug, stop, can it? Can it, kid? This is why we can't have nice things. It's the relationships you build with your work. It's the relationship between your attention and the final quality uh, of the piece or of the output, because we're not necessarily talking about art here. It's the relationship that you build between speed and efficiency and actually making meaning. And I think one of the issues that we can have is that we have this culture of productivity um, that does not encourage that relationship building. So, first thing I want to really kind of get placed is the idea of the kind of things that we do rush through. So for a moment, just if you're here with me or if you're watching this later, uh, think about something that you recently rushed through that would have benefited from more time, more time and attention. And that's not necessarily, again, not necessarily a piece of artwork. That might be a decision that you needed to make, a conversation that was taking place. It might be a meal. It might be work on a hobby, even. So maybe you're working in your garden, maybe you're making a meal, maybe you're baking bread, but but something maybe you were doing in your free time that you rushed through. And then of course it could be a painting or a book or a piece of pottery or welding or anything like that as well, that we think of as, as innately creative. But more broadly, something that you've rushed through recently that would have benefited from more time. So think about that for a moment and just kind of get that in your head. And when I think about things like that, I can think of a lot of conversations, in particular, that I wish I would have taken more time with. And that goes back to that relationship building where being more present and more engaged with that individual, whether it was a professional conversation or just something personal, just running into somebody in the grocery store. But instead of having that, I'm going through my checklist and what's the next thing I'm supposed to be doing, and what is this conversation keeping me from accomplishing, what productivity, just being engaged with that other person. Those are the things that I think of a lot whenever I think of things that would have benefited from more time and attention. But what else? Think about what else that might be for you, because we've all got something, and we probably all have multiple things every day. And so then the question becomes, why do we rush? And I just said, one of the reasons that I know, because I'm terrible about this, that I will rush through a conversation, is because I'm thinking of all of those other productive things, checklist things that I need to get to. That this person, it is a person, an individual that I'm developing a relationship with, a conversation that I'm having, but that person is standing in the way of productivity. And when you really think about it that way, it's kind of shameful, actually. When I really think of it that way, that I would rush through that. So why do we do that? Because in general, I think I'm a nice person, and I'm a person who appreciates relationships and understands how much they benefit you, not just on a productivity, monetary, any kind of relation element like that. But why do we rush through these things? And a lot of it, we live in a culture that celebrates visible output. It wants to see productivity. And just thinking of the workplace in general, we don't get performance reviews for thought reflection. And I remember even saying that when I worked at a position where we had to log all of our hours, and it was very important that hours were logged to the correct project and the correct elements of projects, and all of that had to be accounted for. I remember getting kind of, particularly with my brain, annoyed with that, more than kind of, because I would think, well, then am I supposed to should I log the 45 minutes that I spent on the elliptical? Because I was thinking about work and strategizing and problem solving for those 45 minutes. Well, how do I log the 15 minutes in the shower where I was contemplating and working through issues and doing work and thoughtful reflection, which is what made me good at my job? But you're not going to get a performance review for that, and you didn't get to log that time at the gym, that time at the in the shower, when you're thinking about work. And so that really encouraged in this case very much output work instead of thoughtful, reflective, really well considered products. It emphasized and encouraged work that could be seen and logged effectively instead of thought work that was actually effective. we also, and of course we can get to social media. Social media rewards frequency, and it rewards frequency. The algorithms reward frequency over effectiveness, over truth, over the content, over thoughtfulness. And so that's being emphasized. And of course, schools very much reward completion and the documentation of the thought process, which can be hard sometimes. I was definitely one of those people, particularly in math class, who had a very hard time documenting my work. I could, in a lot of cases, tell you what the answer was, but writing down on a piece of paper how I got there was really hard for me. And sometimes, I wouldn't get credit for the right answer because I couldn't document it, even though I could see it. And so you again get emphasized just through the workplace, through our social structure, and of course through public schools, or through the school system in general, this output completion product kind of focus. And most of us have spent decades being trained to produce instead of how to observe and how to think. And so we fall into this, I like to call it, and I'm sure this isn't mine by any means, but the myth of efficiency. Because efficiency, what we call efficiency, getting it done, I would say getting it done right, and getting it done quickly is great for repetitive tasks. It's great for known outputs. It is terrible for discovery. Curiosity is not efficient. Curiosity is wild and messy, and it takes weird steps sometimes that don't make sense in a process or don't follow a process. Curiosity doesn't follow a process. Discovery doesn't really, you can have critical or creative thinking models. And I used to teach classes and design workshops and stuff that were all about how do you do creative thinking, and there are models and whatnot for it. But it really doesn't happen inside of a model. You have to be willing for real curiosity, real discovery to happen, to break those models, and to let it happen. Because some of the most innately human things, some of the things that matter the most to us, I would say tend to operate on a biological timeline rather than an industrial timeline. And what I mean by that is you cannot efficiently heal from trauma. You cannot efficiently grieve. You can't efficiently fall in love. And again, curiosity, discovery, none of those things are efficient. You don't become an artist efficiently. You don't write a meaningful novel efficiently. You may have methods to get you there, but those kinds of things happen on a biological scale. And I say all of that just because it's important for us. And I know we hear this a lot, but I don't think we recognize it. And I don't know that we embrace it. But slowing down is not lazy. It's not laziness. That doesn't mean that you're not doing good work. It doesn't mean that you're not moving forward. And also, a lot of times when we hear slow down, we hear do less. And oftentimes, at least in my experience, when you slow down, that is not actually the outcome at all. Um, when you slow down, and what I mean by slow down is pay deeper attention. And often, I think most of the times, frankly, when you slow down instead of speeding through everything, I need to remember that you're hearing that. And that might be shocking to you. Bam. Speeding through everything towards completion and towards productivity and towards efficiency, you're actually, maybe you're getting things done initially faster, but you're not fixing avoidable mistakes, for one thing. And that deeper attention will help you see those the first time around. So that real focus will help you see those avoidable issues. And you'll also do what I was doing there and get into a state of flow where things just kind of come to you naturally. And you do tend to be, eventually anyway, what we would also call more efficient, because you are paying such close attention. And so it can feel inefficient because you're moving slower. But I have found that almost always the outcomes are actually superior, and they're going to be less flawed. And you're probably, in the grand scheme of things, when you look back, going to be able to also get more done. Because when you slow down, you start to change how you see the world, and how you notice the world. So, if we're talking creatively in observation, you'll notice color and shadow more intimately and effectively. You'll have a greater awareness of where the edges of objects are and what those actually look like, and how the light interplays with the objects and with various different surfaces, and you really start to take that into account. If you're writing, when you slow down, that's when you really start to develop voice and rhythm, and you start to really develop your own style and understand what that sounds like and what that looks like. It's also, when we're talking about creative writing, when you really start to develop rich characters because you have to slow down and observe to really think about who they are and what they really want and their backgrounds, things that'll never make it onto the page, or at least not in that story, maybe that just drive deeper into who that person, not a character anymore, but person actually is or was. And that slowing down is really important to get there so that you can really work your way into the characters in life and in work. So, we just talked art, painting, writing, but let's, think more in life and workplace. You start to notice people, and engage with the people around you more effectively. You'll start to understand, just like you might understand your character's motivations in a fictional story or in a story. You can start to understand people, real honest to goodness living people that you work with, that you share your time with, that you share your space with, where their emotions are coming from, what stimulates them, um, what they're, why they respond the way they do to certain stimuli. You'll start to pick up patterns. And because of all of that, you'll also be certainly a more effective leader. I think it's that slowing down is huge for anyone. But if you are in any kind of role where you are leading others, and that might be as a parent, that might be as a teacher, that might be as a supervisor, director, manager, something like that. But those are all roles because they're roles with responsibility, with leadership responsibility, in some cases with the safety of your teams as part of your role. That can be very stress inducing, and we have a tendency to heads down, move forward, go fast, just plow on through and get things done whenever we're in those kind of situations. Stress, you got your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn kind of responses, and so we're kind of talking about those as four different responses. But that slowing down can help you face situations, stressful, non-stressful, even emergency situations when they arrive, more effectively, because you're more able to actually observe what's going on and take in the stimuli and potentially respond more appropriately to them. And so we make better decisions and have better outputs really when we do slow down. A lot of the mistakes happen because we act before we understand. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that sounds familiar. Um, we've all been in that situation, and we've all been guilty of it before too. I know I certainly have been, of just being in a, I just have to get things done. I have to move through. We have to plow. We have to finish, and again produce, produce, produce. And instead of seeking to understand, we seek to complete or control the situation. And I think we again have lots of examples of that when we look around. If we look in education, if we look in our workplaces, if we look at the government, this need to act before we understand. And it's incredibly detrimental. The costliest mistakes are often made that way in the workplace, through rushed decision making, and the costliest mistakes in interpersonal relationships are usually made that way as well. Instead of slowing down and taking the time, to really understand the situation, we just again rush through to some decisions. In and let's think more. Let's go back, kind of thinking creative outputs and like workplace and educational outputs a little bit more. Um, because I think a big part of, and I've seen this, I saw this whenever I was a teacher, I saw this as a manager, supervisor, director of teams. People want to get it right the first time. And we put pressure in educational and workplace settings for people to get it right the first time. And one of the things I think we need to adopt from the arts more effectively as a society is to become less afraid of revisions and drafts. Our fast culture really does emphasize you have to get it right immediately, and it has to be right on that first try. But practice, and you'll hear me talk about practice in a lot of these, real practice teaches us that what we need to do is get it started and improve upon it. And that mindset changes how you work. It changes how you approach team leadership. It changes how you teach, because revision becomes an expected part of the process. And that messy beginning when you need some feedback from somebody and it's gonna look rough, is just expected, and it's okay. It's completely fine. And we need to get better at that. I've been in a lot of situations where an organization or a team will say that they support creativity, and they'll even go so far in some cases to say they encourage and support iteration, and they almost always use that word instead of drafts, instead of revision, it's iteration, because that's kind of the buzzword. And so it's, we support creativity and we support iteration, and then dog, you turn in the first thing that looks like a first or second draft. No, they don't. No, they don't. They do not. They support the lip service that they support creativity and iteration. But they're not actually supportive of what that first draft looks like, and the process of, okay, we have a draft, now we have to provide some feedback, some useful collaborative critiques, chances for improvement, ways that it hits the mark and doesn't hit the mark, so that we can take the next step. The number of things that I've turned into someone, some executive director or blah, 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 who asked for a model or an idea. And I would take all this time and put together a first draft that was pretty mean first draft. I still have some of them. Pretty good, really. And then turn it in for, hey, this is what I thought you wanted. Take a look at this. Let me know your feedback, and then I can improve upon it. Crickets. Nothing. I got no feedback. I got nothing. I didn't get thank you. I didn't get support. I didn't get squat. And then I think of like, oh man, the chair of my doctoral committee. Loved that man. Oh my god, I loved him. I loved it too. I got the coolest chair on the planet, Dr. Childress. But the number of times I would work with him, send him my dissertation or an early draft of my dissertation, and then would go into his office for a meeting and think, I'm just going to quit. I'm not going to make it. I'm too stupid for this. I'm not good enough. Just all of that awful self-talk that we do when we're just not in a good place. And I'd just be ready. I'd be ready to walk into this brilliant man's office and be told just how off the mark this draft was, and basically that I should quit. Just quit, Hannah. You're never going to make this. And instead, every time I would walk out of his office energized, engaged, knowing exactly what I needed to change, feeling like I could run the world. He just had this way of understanding that it was, in fact, a process of revisions. It was, in fact, an iterative process. And the fact that what I turned in wasn't perfect and it had some errors, and we needed to do, my survey needed some work. My statistics needed to be checked by somebody who actually knew how to do the stats. That was not fun. We would work through all of those things. And one of the things I remember the most about him is that he was actually, I think he was interim president or dean for the School of Education at one point while he was my chair. He wasn't even going to take on. I'd asked him to be my chair, and he'd said no initially because he didn't have enough space on his docket. And then my chair left, and so he had to pick me up. I mean, it was one of those deals if I ended up with the dude I'd always wanted, but just by chance, by serendipity. But what I remember is that he was so focused on me and my success in there. There was no rushing. There was no, oh, we only have an hour. We got to do, we got to do this. It was always, he was always very, very focused. He was able to slow down all of the things that we're talking about today. And he was able to provide real iterative feedback and seemed to understand, and again, brilliant, amazing man, that creativity, that writing something original, that working on something new requires incubation time. The breakthroughs take time. And we know this. I think a lot of us have heard about the concept that, particularly in creativity, but in anytime you're trying to come up with, even in a conversation, if it's a new workplace practice, if it's a new process, a lot of the breakthroughs don't come when you're working. We started off talking about this. They come when you're working out, when you're in the shower, gardening, driving, doing dishes, because our brains keep working after our conscious effort stops. And you can't force that. you can just create the conditions for it. And some of the conditions that support that, and I think this is one of the things that my chair had a really good head for, that kind of stressful panic that I would go into his office with of I just suck and nothing I do is ever going to be good enough and I'm not smart enough and just that awful self-talk. Those are not the conditions at all for creativity. In fact, those are anti-conditions. Because if you really are supporting innovation and creativity, you are creating a safe space for the people that you want to behave that way. And that includes you. And so I think that's really important is that you're not just creating that situation for your kids or your students or your employees. You need that situation as all, where there's psychological safety and you know that you're supported, and you can't do that with rushing and always trying to get to the end, and you can't do that with negative self-talk, and you can't do that with continuous negative feedback either. Yeah, there's critical feedback for growth, but people do need supports. And I think that's really, really critical for people to hear, particularly leaders, because it can be easy to fall into the trap of, I'm going to be really critical of this so that such and such learns to do it better. But if all you are being is critical, you are not setting up a psychologically safe environment. And you're actually going to negatively impact creativity and innovation at the same time. And rushing people through, rushing yourself through the process will also negatively affect that. And I think that both pottery and painting teach us really cool lessons in that. The arts, of course. In pottery, I have a pottery studio here and teach classes and do stuff, build pottery myself. One of the lessons of clay don't care about your schedule. It doesn't care a thing about your schedule. It dries when it dries, and it is not ready to be fired in the kiln until after it dries. And you can't rush that. You can't rush pottery. If you rush it, you get cracks, you get warping, you have your things fall apart. So the material itself really teaches creative patience. And I think that that's really powerful as a part of that particular craft. And I actually had a really cool conversation about this with a young lady over the weekend. I think painting also gives great lessons in slowing down and observing. And again, this is why I think artists are often seen as really good at this, because you have to be. It is part of the art. Because many beginners what I find is people who say that they are not creative, people who say, I'm not a painter, and I hear that a lot. People are more willing to engage with clay than they are with paint. I'm not a painter. It's not what I do. I'm not creative. It's usually because often because they've kind of stopped too soon. on their work. You know, you sit down and you get started and you draw and you take half an hour, 45 minutes, or you paint and you expect it to be beautiful, but you have to understand that there is a process there, and that it takes time and it takes layers and it takes iteration. I said the word. And that it's probably not going to be done in 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 2 hours or that day or that week. I mean, it might be, but part of that is understanding that it is a process. It is layers. It is attention, and attention requires time. So you have to have that willingness to have it be ugly. And some of my stuff has been only a mama could love ugly from the get-go, to know that you can get it where you want it, but that takes time, and it takes attention. So, you know, the hard truth, I think, of all of it is slowing down. How to say? Slowing down, the hard truth. Slowing down is easier when you have resources. I mean, that's it. That's what I was trying to say. Slowing down is easier when you have resources. And I do want to address that. And I think I've addressed that in a number of these, that taking time, having attention to detail, is more difficult when you are, again, stressed out, when you're juggling jobs, children, caregiving, financial stress, social stress, world stress. All of that is easier when you don't have those worries, the slowing down. And I do want to acknowledge that hard truth. I realize that came kind of out of nowhere, but I do think that that's really critical to talk about, because it can just come off as me being, just slow down, take some time. And you've got, you know, you're feeding your kid over here, you've got another one here holding on to your leg. You're worried how the mortgage is going to get paid, because the daycare is this much, and you don't like your job, and so you're also looking for another job. Well, never mind. No, I'm not looking for another job because I don't even have time to look for another job. So I'm just stuck in this job that I don't even like. So there is all of that, and all of that makes slowing down and noticing harder. It's also so much more important to do so, because even when we can't slow our entire lives down, we can slow our attention down. And even if that's just for 5 minutes, and I'm serious, even if that's just for 5 minutes, heck, even if that's just for 2 minutes, because 5 minutes can be a lot of time to get away if you're, you know, if you got little ones and a job and everything going on. But even if you can just slow your attention down for 2 minutes and observe and not react, find some time to do that meditatively for yourself, and then find some time to do that for decisions, conversations, hobbies. Start eking out minutes at a time where you can provide genuine attention instead of distracted activity. And I promise you that you will start to notice a difference. You notice a difference in your ability to pay attention. You'll notice a difference in the outcomes of the actual work you do. And you'll find that you do start slowing down and just paying attention more effectively and more readily. So, I think I realize I've been talking for 45 minutes. I did not mean for this to go 45 minutes. This is what happens when I don't have a script. I apologize, or don't apologize. Maybe it's been fun. I was also late. Woo, banner day. The goal here isn't to go through life slowly, because I really practice this, but I think a lot of the people who know me would say I speak fast, I walk fast, I work fast. So I don't do things slowly. And in fact, I very much have to sometimes force myself to slow down. But doing those things quickly is different than I'm going to take time to observe before I react. Oh, dogs are going to bark. They're thinking about it. But the goal isn't to move more slowly. It's to stop moving so quickly that you miss experiences, like that experience, like the dogs. That's a delivery. They're going to come now. And I'm normally do that just with them here. Sometimes. Hey, Sophie. Come here. Come here. I know. You have a delivery. Come here. Say hi. Say hi to my friends. So again, goal here is not to stop moving through life. It's not to move slow. It's to really experience. And that's really the thread of this, and to start taking the time, because in so many ways, what I think we have to understand is that we have been trained. It is not natural for us to not pay attention. It's not natural for us as human beings for us to move at speeds and produce. Our natural state is really to be creative and pay attention. We just have to retrain that in ourselves. Oh yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Sorry about the late start, as well as the barking doggos, but you got a real look at life here. I'll be back next month. I will set my alarm, she says. We'll see how far in advance I can set it. And I will endeavor to not have the creature features over here with me so they can't interrupt. But I hope you all have an amazing month. I hope you get a chance to really slow down and observe and enjoy. I'll talk to you later.